All right. Well, first off, I just want to say thank you so much for joining me today. I know this is going to be a really exciting episode, but that you're also taking an hour out of your time today in what's probably a pretty busy schedule. So thank you so much for doing this.
No, thank you for having me. I'm thrilled to be here with you today.
I also know that you have created a lot of content, having followed your socials for a while, but you've also formally taught online. You've been an entrepreneur since going back to 2010 and have definitely created a lot of edutainment style stuff. I'd love to know if you were to teach something right now, though, what would be your absolute favorite thing that would light you up in terms of teaching? Let's say if you go do just a college course on anything,
Yeah.
would you teach?
Oh my gosh. I think there's something that pops into my head around authenticity, not to use too much of a buzzword, but I feel like especially in entrepreneurship and the type of entrepreneurship that I have for myself and what I work on with my clients, their businesses are really extensions of themselves. They're extensions of their own passions, they're extensions of their own interests, they're extensions of their skill set. And bringing yourself into your business in a way where you don't feel like you have to be someone else or wear a mask in any sort of way. I think that's really really hard for people, especially those who have been in like quote unquote professional settings in corporate America, and we've been fed these lines of how we should sound and what we should portray and what that looks like. I think teaching people how to shed that and how to be more comfortable with who they are and convey that in a way that isn't about reveal all your secrets online or anything like that. You don't have to show the skeletons in your closet, but just really own who you are, show up as you are. How can you bring that into your business, your career, your work? um yeah, that would be cool.
It would be a lot of fun. I think we could get into the nitty gritty of breaking down the curriculum and stuff like that. But before we do, if you were to share a story of, or perhaps there's many stories where you felt like it was a little bit difficult to be vulnerable enough to share on an authentic topic and then you went ahead and did it, what would be a story that comes to mind?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. I'm laughing because let's just talk about cancer the first 3 minutes of this. Just let's talk. Let's just get it out there. Um, I was first diagnosed with stage one breast cancer in 2011. So I had been coaching. I started my coaching business in 2008. I had a full time job at that point. I side hustled until 2010 when I was able to go full time. It was March 2010. And then November of 2011, I was 33 and I was diagnosed with stage one breast cancer. And it was definitely that moment of, do I want to say anything like publicly to my audience, quote unquote? What do I want to keep private? Do I need to say anything? Like, how do I want to kind of show up? Um, and how I felt at that moment was the stage one diagnosis. They caught it very early. I lived in New York City. I had an incredible team of doctors, and I just felt like, oh, this is going to be a real crappy 12 months. But it's going to affect my work. It's going to affect how I show up. And I've always aimed to be as transparent, as vulnerable as possible online. I think, especially as a business coach that doesn't sign up or want to amplify the BS I see all around me of, oh, you can make, six figures in 6 minutes and I did it and here's how. I always want to kind of really, you know, have part the curtains and give people that look behind the curtains. And I was like, I'm so vulnerable and transparent about what I'm doing behind the scenes of my business. Um, and because it's going to affect my work, I want to share this. Um, but I didn't want it to be heavy. I hate kind of bringing the roof down. I usually call it boob cancer because breast cancer is, and I go, no, I had boob cancer. And I wound up taking out my ukulele, which I had started playing like less than a year earlier. I had never really wrote songs, but I wrote a song called I've got boob cancer, and I and it was like a 1 minute song, and I played it. I put it up on YouTube. I could send you the link if you want to find it. And I put up a blog post and sent out a newsletter and put it up on Facebook. And, I told my good friends in my family before that. That wasn't the announcement for the people in my inner circle, but that was kind of the announcement. And I posted, I've got boot cancer, in November of 2011. And that was like as close as anything that went viral that I ever posted. It was picked up by news channels. Like people would Facebook message me, and again, 2011, and be like, "Oh my God, you're on my local news." And it was strange, but I find that whatever I'm usually nervous about posting or sharing, and I've shared before, like, hey, I did a big launch of something and it only got 3 signups in a week when I thought it would get 100. Like, here's what happened. Here's what went wrong. I post that. I did that recently with a launch that, even 15 years in, didn't go, oh, I thought I was going to get 15 people. I got 4. Here's what happened. Anytime I'm nervous about posting something like that, it is, oh, I never, ever regret it. And I always get more love and support than anything else. So that's kind of my long answer to your story, to your
And I
question.
have so many more questions that could lead to long or short answers.
Please, 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 please. We got the time.
It was funny that you chuckled and said that about, okay, let's dive into the topic of cancer 3 minutes in.
Mm-hmm.
My dad's currently in the ICU, and they're trying to figure out exactly what's going on. But one of the biggest topics they're talking about is the likelihood of liver cancer. And there've been a lot of people around me in the last few years who have been diagnosed. And I just somewhat recently had to go back to therapy again because of this sort of existential health anxiety type thing that I had when I was a very little kid. And I just wrote about it recently. So all of this is fairly front of mind for many reasons too. When I first heard the Terry Fox story, which for people who aren't familiar is kind of a hero in Canada in terms of bringing awareness to cancer and research, because he attempted to run across the country and didn't quite make it because he died during that run. But every year, every school kid in Canada goes on a run to raise money in the name of Terry Fox.
Yeah.
When my kindergarten teacher taught me that, and I was like 5 years old, I immediately became like intrinsically scared of that word and the idea of ever getting cancer. And I was too young to be able to process that. But that went on basically for until my early 20s, a health anxiety, if you will. For you, was that something that was ever on your radar, or was it completely out of the blue?
Yeah, I mean, kind of both. Cancer was also like, oh, this is the scariest thing that could happen to me. And something I was very terrified of. On both sides of my family, everyone dies from cancer, but they don't die until their 70s, 80s. And so at 33, it wasn't anything that was on my radar at all. It was before having to get mammograms. I was told that even though all sorts of cancers run in my family, this wasn't. I took all the genetic tests. They all came back negative. They're like, it doesn't matter that all of these relatives had cancer. It doesn't affect you because you're so young and they were so old. If someone was younger, then there might be a connection. So it was, yeah, definitely something out of the blue that, because, oh my God, sorry, we're really diving into it. Because I was struggling, with getting pregnant. I was, at the doctor pretty often. And so I noticed, I felt the lump and shooting pain, to the lump. When I was at my sister. It was right after my sister-in-law's wedding, in Vegas. Me and my husband took a trip to the Grand Canyon, like once in a lifetime trip to the Grand Canyon. I was like, feel this lump, what's going on? And thankfully, had a doctor's appointment as soon as we came back to New York. I had a doctor's appointment, and thankfully, the OBGYN who we were seeing was just like, I don't think this is anything, but let's just get you checked out like ASAP, just in case. And that, you know, changed the trajectory of everything. But yeah, nothing that I thought was coming for me at that point in my life, nothing that was lingering for any certain time. It was just like, oh, here's this thing. And, 2 weeks later, it was like, oh, well, there's a diagnosis and everything is upside down.
I don't want to make assumptions and celebrate that you're cancer free now, but I was going to say I'm glad that you are. Just that is the case.
Yes, it's the case. It's a bit weird and confusing because the cancer came back stage 3 in 2015, and then it came back in my lung 2 years ago. So I'm technically stage 4, but once they removed it, I've been cancer free. So I don't have cancer in my body, but technically I'm a stage 4 breast cancer patient, I guess, survivor person. So it's a weird thing that you learn. I said to my doctor, like, well, I don't understand. So like, I'm stage 4, and you're never not stage 4. You're always stage 4. And stage 4 just means that the cancer has gone someplace else in your body. It's metastasized. But I don't have cancer. There's no cancer in my body. And she's like, right, you can kind of think of stage 4 cancer as a gradient, where you are on like the lowest part of the gradient. But there's a scale, and we want to keep you on the lowest, 0 point for as long as we can. So amen and hallelujah, knock on wood, just all the treatments have been working really well, and I barely have any side effects. And other than, having a bunch of scanxiety, as it's called, every few months when I do that, and, going to see my oncologist and getting, a shot every month. It's almost like it's a chronic condition, and day to day, I feel really good. So I'm lucky in that way. And I'm sorry to hear about your dad. That's really hard.
Thank you.
Yeah.
It's one of those things that definitely brings us together. I think kind of that mental illness, I'm sure there are other things, sleeplessness perhaps, but in terms of the really serious stuff, we think of mental illness and cancer that really, or chronic illness that kind of can bring everyone together, no matter what background you're from and all these sorts of things. It's a common enemy, if you will, or a common thing that we have to deal with anyways. And so I appreciate you willing to share that. Have you found that your life has changed since then? And if so, how?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, it's been, I guess from that first diagnosis in 2011, since then we adopted our child, who's non-binary and uses they, them pronouns. So we adopted our child in 2014. So that was a huge, thing that like was not ever on our radar until, we got the diagnosis right after the fertility challenges, and then went, oh, okay, well, I guess like out of all of our options, adoption felt best. So now we have a 10-year-old, which is nuts. So that was a huge change. We lived in New York City. My husband and I met when we lived in New York City, and we were living in an apartment that we bought in Brooklyn at that time. And in 2016, we moved out of that apartment. We moved to a suburb of New York City, Montclair, New Jersey, which we love. And I think that, there is part of a wellness piece of the calm a bit of getting, and the pollution and the noise and stuff of getting out of the city, and living that suburban life, which I never thought I would do. That's a piece of it. And then there's been a bunch of lifestyle changes too. I like to say I'm vegan-ish. When I'm very strictly vegan, I am not happy, and it stresses me out. And so I figure that's not good for me. So I I like to say I'm vegan-ish. I cheat a bunch of with different things depending on, what it is. I've overhauled, skincare, makeup, those sorts of things, plastics, um, in a really big way. There's a wonderful book with a horrible name, I think, called Anti-Cancer, which I read pretty soon after my first diagnosis, and it just for anyone who wants to learn more about why cancer is so prevalent right now, especially in the US and Canada, and these like very developed nations, and since right really over the past 50, 60 years, it just gives a lot of reasons as to why this is happening, and some things that I feel like are more in our control. Um, Even though, I joke, like, I don't think ice cream gave me cancer. And I don't think it's necessarily gonna, give anyone cancer, but, um, there are those sorts of changes, that happen too. And then mindset stuff also, obviously, just talking about therapy, just exploring your mortality in this way that you wouldn't think you have to in your 30s and your 40s, and that kind of slowing down, um, being more gentle with myself, and not looking at my stress levels, and prioritizing exercise, because bottom line, it's studies have shown it helps, with reoccurrence. So things like that have really shifted too.
Which is not the reason why you want to have to go through something like that. But in the event that it becomes the reason that you do, and then it ends up being okay from a diagnostic perspective, then maybe it's one of those super unfortunate silver linings.
Yeah. I call it. It's a begrudging life lesson. You can feel free to steal that term. It's like, I wish I would have learned this any other way, but okay, fine. That's kind of how I feel about those things.
That makes a lot of sense. And it reminds me of slightly off topic, but maybe not a bad thing for a little bit of a reprieve from the depths of our conversation. But I was talking to a friend of mine who likes hip hop music. We're both kind of hip hop heads a little bit. And I was showing him some music that I recorded with youth who were serving jail time. I was working in a jail for youth. And he said, "Oh, what are like some of these people in for?" And I was like, really, really serious stuff, And he said, "Oh, well, that's good, because then they have street cred." And I was like, "No, they don't need street cred. They have more street cred than Snoop Dogg, 50 Cent, Jay-Z all put together. Like, that's not what they need. They need to stay out
Wow.
of trouble to
Wow.
be able to succeed."
Yeah.
And similarly for me, a lot of people will talk about, some business advice, and you just assume that maybe some people don't live with gratitude, or existentially are aware of, oh, we could die tomorrow.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
I grew up in a
Yeah.
funeral
Yeah.
home. People used to call me my girl, and like, just to go to bed, I would go like kneel beside caskets of like children, and like say goodnight to them, and tell them how, like, I promise, you're only 10 and I'm 10, so I'm not going to take my life for granted, and stuff like that. And
Wow.
on a deeper level, like my brothers, there's a painting to the left of me my dad made with both of their ashes in it. My two younger brothers have passed away already.
Wow.
And I say all of this to say, people are like, "Oh, it's good because, you can write a newsletter on grief." I'm like, I didn't need all of this
Right?
to,
No.
to do
Right.
that.
Yes.
I begrudgingly would have been willing to do a podcast episode on grief without all of this.
Yes. Yes. I have a former client who's like the loveliest person, and she gave me, I'm going to forget what it's called. It's some sort of past lives reading, but it's not about your past. It's like about your purpose. But it brings in your past lives. I don't know. It's like super woo, great, out there, love it. Like, and this, I remember being back in my Brooklyn apartment. So this was quite a while ago. It was probably maybe in between my first and second diagnosis, or right after my second diagnosis. And the one thing that stuck with me from that reading is just like, you were meant to go through painful things and share them and help other people. And I'm like, no, I don't want that to be my life. And similarly, when I got the cancer diagnosis, started telling people were like, "Oh, are you now changing your business so that you're like a cancer coach?" Nope. No, I'm not.
Hmm.
No, I'm not. Not what I want to have my days be about. Not, and God bless the people who could do that. It's not me. But yeah, I think about that sometimes. Yeah, your life is to go through painful things and share them. Okay.
I think it's something that we can certainly all lean on. So you mentioned the business. I know that, you know, most recently you've been doing a lot of supporting people with launching businesses, and there's a whole, let's say, hero's journey, if you will, to
Yeah,
your
yeah.
having built your business over the last 15 years thereabouts. And a lot of people who have come on the show have maybe only been building a business for like 5 years. I don't really think that it matters how long you've been at it, but let's just say you do have a lot of experience. So the other thing that a lot of people who tune into the show, who send requests for like topics on the show, are definitely very much in that creative. I want to monetize being an acrylic painter, or painting. I have a set
Uh-huh.
of shoes that
Uh-huh.
someone sent me right behind me that, they paint all the shoe art, like those kinds of really heavy, creative, artistic pursuits.
Yeah.
Um,
Yes.
and I know recently I heard like Scott Galloway and Cal Newport on podcasts talking about that idea of being so good at like your actual, and they tend to be left brain things, right? Career based things, as opposed to worrying about creativity and leave your creativity for the weekends. So I give all that preamble because I think I'm assuming something that you've been able to do well is help people have their cake and eat it too a little bit.
Yes. Yes.
That's a
Yes.
massive topic. We could build an entire show on this topic, let alone one episode.
Right,
But with
right,
all of that
right.
as like a prompt, what do you think are some things that people who do want to monetize their creativity or figure out their path to entrepreneurship for themselves, what should they be keeping in mind?
Oh my gosh. Yeah, you're right. We could have a whole different show. So, the things that come to mind though, number one, I just want to emphasize I exclusively work with creative, multi passionate people. So these are my, like, exactly the idea that you described. These are my people. And this is a huge reason why I got into this business and do the work that I do. Because I started as a musical theater performer, and couldn't find anyone that kind of like spoke my language, that understood, like a coach that understood creative people. Um, and so I kind of set out to be the coach that I needed. And so I know that probably your average listener have heard that, you got to niche down and you got to pick one thing and so I just want to like sweep that all away and say, like, yes, there needs to be some cohesion to what you're doing if you're doing multiple things. And sometimes you can mash those things into one business and sometimes you cannot. So, like, for example, I have a former client who is a home inspector, and she also does like home energy healing. So she'll go in with a sage and do the practices, and we were able to merge them into one business because it's about like caring for your home, and that was able to work. So whether someone wanted an inspection or someone wanted a, sage clearing, we were able to wrap it together and make it work. But I like to say, if you want to come and say, well, I'm a custom sneaker designer and also a dog walker, that might not work under one umbrella, right? Or I'll say something along the lines of, you might want to make custom sneakers as like the marketing for your brand, right? You might want to make your own sneakers with your logo and take a branded photo shoot, and that could be your client gift. Anyone who walks their dogs with you for a year, you paint their pet on the shoes, and that's like a cool thing, right? Which leads me to, in 2024, if you want to have an online business, it's a blessing and a curse that there are infinite ways to do it. Yay, there's so many different ways I can mesh things together. I could make money, I could market myself. It's so freeing, it's exciting. A lot of them, there's very low barriers to entry, but oh my gosh, it's so overwhelming. I don't know what to do. I have so many options. Where do I pick? What do I do? So it's very hard and to give that like one size fits all advice of, oh, you should definitely start your Etsy store. Oh, you should definitely, package yourself up in this way. You should definitely like it's why I term the phrase coach sultant, which is what I like to call myself, because on one hand, what I care about most is how my client wants to run their business, what they want to work on, who they want to work with, how they want to spend their time. And then we try to find, like, if you make it a Venn diagram, we try to find, like, who's that ideal client or customer? What do we think they want? And let's try to find the overlap. And I could work with 10 different custom shoe designers, and I guarantee you they will have 10 different looking businesses in various ways. So I think what I want to encourage the listeners who are experiencing this is to try not to figure it out on your own. It's funny because when you asked me that first question, I was about to talk about a program that I've run before that I'm about to relaunch sometime soon called Discover Your Dream Business, which helps with like exactly this. Helping you hone in on what is the idea or the ideas, how can we kind of bring them together and make it specific enough that it's going to be coherent and it's going to be clear, and you're not going to feel like a hot mess when you tell people about your business, but it's going to be expansive enough that you're feeling like I have room. I have room for, the projects I want to work on or the work that I want to do. But really being honest with yourself and listening to probably the very, very tiny soft voice in your head that's telling you this thing, this thing, this thing, and you're batting it away saying, no, 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 I can't be that. I can't do that. That's not going to work for me, blah, blah, blah. That voice or the thing that you've been talking about for the last 10 years, like that's what I take seriously more than anything else.
The contingent, creative, and that's definitely the right word, creative, I should just leave it at that, approach that you take to helping people with
Yeah.
this is the same way that I've taught as a traditional educator for 20 years. Teachers will ask me for like a lesson plan or for some kind of program to teach their students. And I'm like, I got nothing, because I'm like, I promise you every single time it's going to be completely different depending on who I'm working with. The super fun thing for me is all the while that I've been learning about and pursuing my own online business journey, I've been actually teaching that as a topic in schools. It's been not necessarily the actual credit per se, it has been, but it's more the lens through which I view things. So if you're working on writing, for example, then this is a real example from recently, someone who wanted to work on a nonfiction book for English, but she actually wants to publish books and become an author in like when she grows up, quote unquote.
When she grows up.
And so we worked on building like, what would your Shopify store look like if you were selling your books and your journals, and what would your about bio be?
Yeah.
And then actually writing the book, obviously, but also we do a whole like mind map over the course of a couple of days of, well, what are other like revenue streams that could exist down the line when you've, built a bit of a brand, like maybe you come out with nice pens and
Yes.
brainstorming those things. And I've done that with pretty much every industry, probably, with whether it's clients or students. And it is so much fun. I can really appreciate when you say that it would be different, because I've never had that be the same answer twice. To give some like a concrete sort of like example of, though, completely fictitious, or maybe there's like an idea that you'll never be able to pursue anyways. Like if you have your own business ideas or an example that we could share of, like, I guess the shoe sneakers would be a good example, but maybe another one of like, if someone were to start, what would be sort of the process in a step-by-step way?
Yes, 1,000,000%. And I do have this. This is what happens after 15 years of doing this. And so there is a I call it the 4-phase head to web process, right? You're going to get out of your head and onto the web in a real way. And the first piece are building your business foundations. And that is usually what people gloss over. So I love that you talked about that, because I think, again, in 2024, when we look at the business gurus and the big coaches with the huge platforms, they're mostly, a lot of times they're talking about marketing. So I think a lot of times people will dive into marketing and they'll be like, oh, well, I have this Instagram account, or well, I have this Substack, or well, I have, but they don't know who they're talking to or who they're selling to. They don't know the problem that their business solves. They like have a name for it, but they're like, oh, I don't know if this name doesn't feel right. When someone asks them, what do you do? Or, oh, what's this business about? They don't have an answer that feels good and is clear and is professional. So to me, is that piece the first thing you need to do? And this is after the, like, I know what the business is, right? You can't do these steps until you decide this is what the business is. And so you have to do that first. Then it's, what problem are you solving? Who do you want to reach and work with and sell to? What are their challenges? What do they want to walk away with? How are they talking about this problem? What are they scared of? Then we're figuring out the business name. We're figuring out the elevator pitch. We're figuring out the brand words. So you could, show up in the way that you want to make it easier, and look professional and convey the messaging the way you want. And then it's about the offers or the products. What are you offering? What is the packaging? What is the pricing? How many different types of sneakers are you offering? I always say for my clients that are launching products, start with like 3 different products. Doesn't have to be more than that. But maybe you have, a high top and a low top. You know what? That could be enough, right? And just tell me, what do you want me to do for a custom high top or low top? And the high top is this much money and the low top is this much money. But figuring out, well, what's my process on taking a custom order? How is someone getting me the information? How am I getting paid? So you're figuring out, that onboarding process, and the payment process. You're figuring out how you're going to market. Because again, there's so many different ways to do it. What is going to be appealing for you? Where do we think your potential clients and customers are at? So that's all phase 1, to kind of get in that planning clarity piece. Then you go on to the marketing. Then it's about creating resonant marketing, where the branding can really and should really, doesn't need to be anything fancy, professional, even though I love me a good graphic designer, branding designer. Love you all. No disrespect. But if you don't have the budget or it's trouble getting started, just figure out your logo, figure out your fonts and your colors. You don't even need a logo. Just, here are the 2 fonts I'm going to use. Here are the 3 colors I'm going to use. So things look professional and coherent, cohesive. And then we're doing copywriting. Then we're building a website. And it's something, you don't necessarily need a website, but man, when you have a website that does the heavy lifting for you and you're proud of it, and that you're gonna, send an email to someone and your URL is gonna be at the bottom and you'll be like, yeah, click that baby. That looks good. That's a good representation. You show up in a different way. People see you in a different way. So that's all like phase 2. And then phase 3 is about, launching, telling people. And I tell my clients all the time, I have a program called 90-Day Business Launch, and we do this together with a lot of personalized feedback. But I'll say, launch, you feel like launch day is the end of the road. Like, oh, I did all the things and now here I am, I'm finally launching. But like, nope, it's the beginning, and it is potentially harder than anything you've done leading up to it, because now you have to be public. You have to talk about what you're doing. You have to tap people on the shoulder, because your first clients are going to be within 1 or 2 degrees of separation. And your first customers, like pretty much without exception, maybe 3 degrees of separation, maybe. So hopefully you don't have to worry about, oh, I need to, have 1 million Instagram followers in order to make it. Like, no, you just have to tell the people that already know you, here's what I'm doing. Here's my new thing. Could you use it? Can you introduce me to someone who does? And that's really vulnerable and hard and scary. So, it is building those strong business foundations, creating resonant marketing, launching with confidence, and then connecting with clients. And again, makes it sound simple, and harder than it seems, but that's always what I'm teaching and guiding my clients through after they come to me and say, I know I want a custom sneaker business, or I know I want to be a copywriter, or whatever they need to have that. I know I want a home healing and inspection business. I go, okay, great, let's go.
Or I know I want the shoe art,
Yes.
which when you were talking about that idea earlier, I was thinking, and you were talking about putting that together with dog walking, I was like, well, it could be you pivot your shoe designs to designs of coats for dogs as opposed to shoes, and you kind of collapse your multi-passionateness of them. It is such a huge topic. It comes up a lot on the show because really my mission is very similar to yours and similar to a lot of guests in that we do want to help people who struggle to live with vitality because they can't monetize their passion at least a little bit, right? And there's this sort of myth that like, well, we can't all just be Hollywood or / Netflix actors, that like some of us, we need to figure out what does that pivot become for us that also fuels us in like a big dream style, Maya Marsha Weeder was on the show previously, and she's someone who sat on Oprah's couch and explained this exact thing, which is pretty crazy. And she was like, Justin, do you know how hard it was for me to sell just the concept of dream big for 20 years? She's like, but once people caught on, then I was so glad that I stuck with it. And so I feel I'm much earlier on in my journey, but a lot of times I'll look at shiny objects where it's like, oh, that would be a lot easier to monetize. A lot of B2B stuff, for example, people are like, well, why don't you spend more time writing email courses for people? I'm like, because it's like a trade-off, right?
Yeah.
Would that put more money in my pocket right now? Yeah, but it's always these decisions we make. Anyhow,
yeah.
When it comes to that process, I do appreciate you summarizing it in like 4 minutes, because I do think that's helpful for people who, sometimes we have to take our expert hats off a little bit and like break it down, because that sort of cursive knowledge and experience can be hard. But when someone's beginning, at least they can kind of listen to that and be like, oh yeah, I friggin' haven't even thought about that. The biggest thing that I see people struggle with, and you said it at the top of that sort of, I don't know if it was a rant, but the thing about modern business, when you were talking about, the soapbox moment about niche. Another friend who's been on the show, Justin Moore, has a show called Creator Debates. I know season 3 is about to come out soon. They debate these topics that are easily debatable in this world. So there's no real wrong answer, but when it does come to that topic, or if you have some examples of clients with respect to that struggle, I think it holds people back for years.
Yes, 1,000,000%. Nothing pains me more than someone who is just like, oh yeah, I could help anyone who needs a copywriter. You need copywritten, I could do everything for you. You're any person in the world who needs copy in any way, shape, or form, I'm your person. Or someone who's like, I'm a life coach and I work with any person in the world who needs help getting from point A to point B quicker and easier. Or, I'm a nutritionist and I help anyone who's struggling with food. It's like, if you're talking to everyone, you're talking to no one. I forget who said that, but it's worth repeating, even though I feel
probably
like
Walt Disney.
It was supposed to, yeah, probably Walt Disney. Never want to repeat Walt Disney, but if you're talking to everyone, you're talking to no one. And I think that, is it impossible to get there when you're so general? No, not impossible. I think it is a harder climb, because even just a little tweak. So for example, I'm a copywriter that will write any sort of copy that any person in the world wants, as opposed to saying, I'm a content writer and I work with entrepreneurs. Like, even just content entrepreneurs, still really broad, tons of people, but automatically I'm leaning in, because if I'm an entrepreneur and if I need help with my content, I'm like, tell me more. But if you just tell me, oh, I'm a copywriter and I could do anything for anyone, I'm probably not, because I'm going, well, that's not me. That's not, why do I, oh, okay. So there needs to be something there that your right person could recognize themselves, and you make it easy for that right person to recognize themselves. Um, and you want that person to have it be more of a no-brainer decision to hire you than anyone else. A good example, I have a client that just relaunched her business today. She is a nutritionist, wellness coach. And she was like, no, 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 I could help anyone who is struggling. No, no, no. Who are you helping? And she's like, well, and it could be this easy. Sometimes we think this is cheating. She's passionate about helping women over 40. So you have these hormonal changes. She's in her 50s herself. But she's like, but I also want to work with companies. And so I don't necessarily want to say women. I say, we're going to say you help you coach individuals, you specialize in women over 40, and then you go into companies and give workshops about wellness. Like, but me as a 46-year-old woman, I'm more likely to hire her because I know she gets my unique needs in this moment than anyone who's just like, oh, I'm a nutritionist. So that's where just those slight tweaks of, I work with women over 40. I work with Gen Xers. I work with mid-level professionals. Like, I love this, career coaches that are just people in the is this what they're called? Mid-level professionals. That doesn't sound right. People who are in like the middle of their careers, right? And it's so broad. It's so broad, but it's niched enough that if I was in corporate America and I was sitting here at 45, I'll go, oh yeah, I'm in the middle of my career. Oh, I'm not quite where I want to. I'm not at the top here, but I'm right here. Like, okay, tell me more about you. And you are allowed and encouraged to just zero in on the type of people that you you speak the same language, that you inherently like get and understand, that you're excited about helping. And that's like, it could be that simple. And what I just said this today in a consultation call, you try to put the crystal ball away, because we are conditioned to say, like, we need to pick a lane and then that's the lane that we should stay in until we retire and that's how we succeed. Every successful business owner evolves, changes. I tell my clients, the only time I worry about what's happening in your business is if I go to your website after 6 months, a year of working together, and it looks exactly the same. Then I go, oh, this business is stagnant. This person probably hasn't shown up. Something's not happening. Successful businesses, sustainable businesses change and evolve. And so it's just your starting point. So if you want to say, okay, yeah, I'm going to work with Gen Xers, for example, you might find that, oh, okay, it's not actually Gen Xers, it's people in their 40s. And 6 months later, you go, yeah, I work with people in their 40s. Or, it's not this, it's this. And you're going to change things. My elevator pitch and who I'm talking to, it just evolves more frequently than you would think. So giving yourself that space and that grace to like, just what is the current version of me and the near future version of me? What do I want to kind of claim, or what do I want to call in? We could be kind of woo-woo. What do I want to call in? Who do I want to call in? And it could be that simple. Makes a huge difference.
Putting the crystal ball away is really powerful advice that I could have used years ago. And even on the creative side of things, like the title of this podcast changed completely. A lot of things have evolved over the years. And I know Emily Wapnick, who hosts the Puttyverse, right, is big on helping creatives. And if I remember, her ebook was Renaissance Business or something like that, a guide to helping people. Anyways, the way that she describes the ability to put language still into a multi-passionate business model is one of the ways that I've always appreciated hearing it. And I think the way that you just summarized it as well is really, really helpful to a lot of people. One of the things that I do like to mention too, that isn't necessarily pragmatic without context either, but really helped me, where a light bulb went off, was like, damn, I wish someone would have said that to me 4 years ago, was the idea of creating separate landing pages and segmenting audiences too, right?
Yeah.
Because I used
Yeah.
to
Oh
always
yeah.
feel less on the target audience, who's my audience side, and more what's the topic thing, that like these topics would nag at me, right? And so I
Mm,
was just sharing earlier that I just finished writing about grief. That's because it's a whole like 7 week email course that comes out once a week over seven
mm,
weeks to help people take grief and use that to fuel their life writing, because that really helped me a ton. And there's also the ability to click where if you were the type of person that just wants a prompt every morning for your writing, then you
yeah.
can sign up to that. And it's like 365 days
Yeah.
of prompts on grief writing.
Wow.
But like, does that really
Wow.
have to do with what I'm building? Maybe, maybe not, but it exists. And it was not, it was like enough hours, but it was not a ton of work in the sense of like trying to build some course out that I expect people to pay $4,000 for, or I didn't have to go rent a building and,
Yeah.
it wasn't
Right.
this
Right.
huge
Right.
lift to create
Right.
it. But before, I wouldn't have created that because I would have kind of worried about confusing an audience or confusing what I was building
Yeah.
as a
Yeah.
topic, right?
Yeah.
But the ability to take something and go super niche, like how to start your first podcast or how to interview better in a podcast, is something that I wouldn't have created because I was like, well, I don't want to be Pat Flynn or John Lee Dumas, who are like podcast
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
coaches in
Uh-huh.
terms of their business model.
Yeah.
But now I'm like, oh no, I can still do that. That's a separate landing page.
Yeah.
Maybe it gives you
Yeah.
12
A
points of a
million percent.
checklist that you can download. And with respect to the email list, you become someone who is in that podcast interested group. Who knows where that will lead in the future. But that was huge for me. Like segmenting
Yeah.
audiences, I guess, was another thing that was really empowering.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. Love that.
I think this is actually a good segue into shiny object syndrome, as some people call it. But the idea of like having so many things that we could do versus Pareto's principle of what is the fewer amount of things that are really important that you do. And this is still, I'm in recovery big time from this and still struggling maybe. Organization and productivity seems to be one of your strong suits.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
I won't say it's rare for creative people, but
No, you can say
okay,
it. You can say
you're a unicorn.
it.
So
Yeah. Yeah.
how do you advise people who are creative, they're multi-passionate, they have a billion different ideas, to stay on track when it comes to achieving the revenue goals or making this sustainable?
Yeah. I've always said, and it's funny you brought up Emily. I've known Emily, since dinosaurs roamed the internet. We came up kind of together way back when and have collaborated, and Emily's awesome. And I've said to Emily and other, multi-passionate people, it's like, when someone figures out the one size fits all strategy for productivity for multi-passionate creatives, that person will be a gazillionaire because it's impossible. Like it's impossible. So I think number one, you have to figure out what works for you. I'm all about an experimental mindset in regards to everything, in regards to what I'm creating, in regards to what I'm launching, in regards to, how I'm showing up for my clients, what I'm doing for my programs. And that has to be the case with productivity, I think. We have to think about what has helped us in the past, what has helped us show up, what has helped us prioritize. Uh, I like, I'm not a huge Gretchen Rubin fan. Don't tell her, she won't care. But she has a book called like Better Than Before or something, with the four tendencies. I really like that model of the four tendencies, and you could even take a quiz online, and she kind of gives you a printout of like, are you an obliger? Are you a rebel? Are you a questioner? Are you an upholder? Upholder is someone that once they make the commitment to the thing, even if it's just to themselves, they'll go through with it. I'm an upholder, kind of a jerk that way. She's an upholder too. Uh, Rebels will just do the opposite of anything that they're told. Questioners, like, they have to they have to be on board with feeling like this is the right thing for them to do. So normally they ask a lot of questions before then saying like, okay, yes, I'll do this, or no, I won't do this. And obligers need the external accountability. And I bring that up because sometimes even just finding that out, right? Or thinking about what's worked for me before. I think a lot of us creative multi-passionates, and especially so many of us are neurodivergent or have been diagnosed neurodivergent recently-ish. I feel like it's a pandemic in a way of my female friends, especially in their 30s and 40s, are getting newly diagnosed as ADHD. So it is about, how do I show up? Do I need another person there tapping me on the shoulder? Do I need, co-working sessions? Do I need someone texting me on Friday? Hey, did you do the thing that you did on Monday? Are you a pen and paper person for your planner? Are you digital? You have to, and finding out your tendency and looking that up too. She gives you some examples of, if you're this might help. If you're this might help, which is why I kind of went off on that tangent. Part of it, and it ebbs and flows for me. Like, there was a long period of time where I loved time blocking on my Google Cal, and I would look at my Google Cal and everything, on my work day was all time blocked, and my breaks and my whatever. And like, that was great. As a multi-passionate creative, I wouldn't necessarily follow it exactly. And it told me, write your next article at 1 p.m. on Tuesday, and then be 1 p.m. on Tuesday. I'm like, I don't want to do this. I'm going to do the thing that's scheduled for 4 o'clock. That feels good now. Who cares if I'm doing it an hour later, and move things around? But that felt good. And then a few months ago, maybe about a year ago, like, I want to see space on my calendar. I can't deal with these time blocks. And so I did something, differently. I'll plug my Yay Business Planner, which I created. And it's funny, you talked about, the separate landing pages and things that you do that aren't necessarily connected to your business, but I made a shop. I made a print on demand shop. And this is my first product, like, 15 years in. I never made a physical product before, but I made a physical product. I'm on version 2.0 now. Like, in a month, these will look different. But I basically created the planner that I needed and wanted. And it's about, for me, I'm big on like 90-day goals. I call them now focus points, because sometimes goals are too scary for people, right? So like, what are your focus points? Small boxes, so we don't have a ton of space, or I'm going to do this, and I'm going to do this, and I'm going to do this, and I'm going to do this. You'll see, like, today, where was it? These planning, there's only like one small, but one, and I have a community called Show Up Squad. They get this planner as part of their membership. We have planning parties every Monday for half an hour. We're coming in together. We're having like co-working time where we're filling this out. I'm forcing you to fill this out. Talk about it. We have a Friday thread. How did it go? We have plan and review, drop-in calls for 2 hours at the end of every month. There's review pages for the month that we fill out together. There's a planning page for the next month, but it's like as simple as it could be. I think that's the piece too. Because if we're trying, oh my gosh, I need to review, and this is, 10 pages, and then I'm planning everything within an inch of its life, like, it's just not happening. So trying to make things as simple and easy as possible. That's kind of, it's hard because, again, no one size fits all. So just figuring out what works for you.
It's the hardest thing about a show like this, where it's like interview experts, have experts break some knowledge into educational, consumable, bite-sized pieces that can change someone's life. And the crazy thing is, I know it will. I know it already has.
Yes.
That's the fun thing. But definitely that's one of the common themes, is there's no one-size-fits-all approach, which is, I don't even know why the heck I wrote about this very recently. Just last week at some point, I think I was working on my book, and it had nothing to do with like plugging the concept of coaching, but I was saying coaching can never truly be beat, whether you're an athlete or you're a child being helped by your parent or a great teacher you have or what have you. Coaching wins because
Yeah, yeah.
the ability to be so contextual in the moment, have your thumb on the pulse of exactly how someone's feeling at that time. I was a personal trainer previously. Very similarly, people will ask me, well, what should I do to get back in shape? It's like, oh, you get like 20 minutes at a bus stop or something. It's like, good luck. Mike, here's some ideas, but you're probably better off with Google or AI to help you than me if we never see each other again. But there's so much context. And in any case, I do know at least that a lot of times learning something on a podcast episode really has created a light bulb moment or some kind of like, maybe not a big leap where I like quit my job and run away and like build a business, but a leap in the sense of mentally. That sort of holy shit moment happens a lot while I'm listening to podcasts. And I think that really will be quite helpful to people. Well, I'll look at my notes quickly and just rattle off some topics because I wrote down careers, I wrote down successes, creatives, and being multi-passionate, entrepreneurship, building in public, our heroes' journeys, creativity and design, school as a system or your own experiences, social media. I wrote life coaching, and then I wrote parenting and avoiding burnout when we're not just, when we have other pieces of our lives that some other people don't. That's how I like to, this is a little behind the scenes I don't think I've ever showed, how I like to prepare for podcasts, which has evolved for me too. Sometimes one topic can go the entire episode, and sometimes you kind of hop around, which we've certainly covered some of these, but I know that naturally there'll come the time where we need to wrap. So when you think of like the audience being that high school, college age youth, just trying to friggin' figure all this difficult stuff out, and there's these different really big topics going on, if there was something that we were to riff on for a little bit that you think would make this a fun podcast episode that you've created together, what are some things that come to mind?
It's funny, as you were rattling off those topics too, I was just thinking about like reemerging into my creative life as a performer the last couple years, because I took a big break from musical theater, which was my first love. I went to NYU Tisch School of the Arts, something I'm super proud of, and I got my BFA in musical theater, and I tried that life, and then wasn't working for me anymore and shifted gears. So I think highlighting, follow your dream and let yourself have new dreams. Your dreams will change. And sometimes they're hard to reconcile, especially if they're not non-traditional dreams or not the dreams that your parents tell you should have or society tells you should have, but really just recognizing what you want for yourself, going after that, and then when it changes, because it will, recognizing that too. But when I decided, okay, I'm gonna be a business owner, and then I'm gonna be I didn't start out as a business coach. Please, no one start out as a business coach if you have no experience running a business, please. I started out as a career coach for creative people, and wasn't performing really anymore, because all of my attention was going into the business. And I was telling myself that my creative outlet, like my creative urges, were being scratched from my business. Because, for better or for worse, to be a solopreneur, to use a buzzword where it's like just you might have some freelancers that work with you, but otherwise it's just you. There's so much that you do, and being an entrepreneur is a wonderful career for a creative, because you do have so many outlets. I was just telling myself, like, no, my creative needs are being met. Yeah. I'm just, here I'm, doing this thing and I'm writing this, and I'm, I had a podcast at one point and I wrote, the theme music and the in between music on my ukulele and whatever. And just like, oh no, that was enough. That was great. But then it just like wasn't. And I just kept thinking, I want to get back to performing. I want to get back to performing. I want to get back to performing. Um, and finally, about 2 years ago, after like a 13-year break of performing in musicals, I just went to a community theater that was doing Legally Blonde, which to me is like, this is a fun show. I don't care what the heck part I get. I'm just going to go back on stage. And it has been such a homecoming for me in a lot of ways. And I've performed in 3 other shows since then. So like once, twice a year, I get on stage and I'm in a musical, and it has nothing to do with any other part of my life. But as my therapist said to me at one point, like, you need to do the things that feel like home to you, and that make you feel like you. And I just hope that they don't negate that part of themselves, especially when society tells us, once you're at a certain age, your life should be work or work in your family. And that's kind of it. Being true to who you are as a creative and how that's going to change and evolve, and making time for that and prioritizing it, is going to give you a much better life than you would have otherwise. You don't have to have like, I don't want anyone to hang their hat on career fulfillment as like, the be all end all of their life, which I think we're told, especially in the States, that that's the be all end all. It's about career, 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 career. But I'm hopeful. I don't know if you see it in your kids. I feel like this generation is pretty extraordinary. These kids that are in school now are just very true to themselves. And I think there's going to be a new way of living. They're going to have a new way of living their lives and showing up for their work, and showing up for themselves in a way that hasn't been seen before. So no pressure to Generation Alpha, I think we're calling them. But I'm hopeful for what that could be, because that really is that work-life integration, being who you are in all the spaces and being true to who you are and what you want, especially if it's not something being monetized, if it's not, we're told like it's not important, that all that counts is money when you're a grown up. Not true.
Absolutely not true. And so much of what we've spoke about is colliding, because when you think about not having our health and having regrets about things we could have left legacy with, or even just, to use a less heavy term, like just, things that we feel like we wish we would have done and stuff. But so many moments throughout this episode, and also things that we've discussed outside of the episode, are combining, because when you asked about this generation, I was actually just speaking with a client today who is non-binary, working on legally changing their name, which is a huge pain in the ass right now, but through therapy and some support is in a good place with that, because they recognize that eventually it's going to work out. But one of the biggest struggles that they've had is the fact that their parents are not supportive of the industry that they want to go into and those sorts of things. And you mentioned acting, and you said, well, that you were getting your creativity sort of through the business. And it made me think of that conversation that I had with them just today, because you weren't really acting in that creativity, right? Although some slimy business people, I guess, are, but in your case, you weren't. Totally. And so it's pretty domain specific to an extent. And acting's in a world of its own. I've been on, background on like, let's say 10 Hallmark movies. Woohoo. And I've always been interested in acting.
Oh, cool.
One of the weird things about it is I'm like, compared to singing, spoken word poetry, painting, all these things that you can do in 10 minutes in between podcast episodes or after your kids go to bed. Like, acting's not really that.
That's true. I never thought of that.
And true.
That's true.
when I mentioned these things colliding, it's because for me, it's not as bad as acting in this way, but I was a football player, American football, tackle football. When that's done, it's done. There's no going back. You could coach, you
Yeah,
could start
yeah,
pivoting, but they're not
yeah.
they're not the same. And so I feel like 40 hours a week for about 10 years, thousands of games for me weren't really a waste because I've written articles about like the life
Hmm.
lessons from football, blah blah blah, but I do wish that
Yeah,
I had put a lot of that energy into something like acting or
yeah,
guitar or insert creative pursuit, even golf, which is still a sport, but something that could last my whole life, right? And so that's
yes.
one of the reasons why I started really going deep into Carol Dweck's growth mindset work and trying to figure out, well,
Hmm. Hmm.
how do I regain creativity? Because for the longest time, I was just a football player. And then when that's done, cold turkey, you're a civilian and you're trying to figure it out. And there's a whole mental health
Yes, yes.
aspect to all of that, anyways.
And you tangentially brought up something that I feel is really important that doesn't get talked about enough is that like that identity shift that you have when you go from football player to not a football player, or you go from, um, I tell my clients all the time that, starting a business at the very beginning of this entrepreneurial journey, the average age of my client is like 42. They've lived a life. They're known for certain roles or titles or, whatnot that they've already, accomplished or are working at in their lives. And now all of a sudden you are voluntarily like starting over in a way. And why it's so big and scary is that it's the identity shift more than anything. And to me, deciding to leave acting behind as a profession, I think a lot of what hindered me for so long, because it was probably a year or more of the voice in my head saying, you don't want to do this, you don't want to do this, you don't want to do this. Um, it was me going, but who am I if I'm not the if I'm not pursuing acting? Who am I? And what do I do with myself if on Thursdays I don't have to go get backstage newspaper and take all the auditions and put them in my calendar and send out headshots? Like, who am I and what do I do with myself? Um, and that's huge. And that's part of why this is so hard, even for the clients that I work with that are basically just taking their work experience and professional experience and just turning it into like a consulting role, right? They're taking what they're known for and they're turning it into a business. And like, even though you've done this work, you're known for this thing. This entrepreneurship is so new. And now all of a sudden you're a business owner out of no, like it takes takes a lot to, go through that and come to terms with that and be that beginner and be gentle with yourself.
When you mentioned, you asked, I guess, that you weren't sure how I saw in my daughter and the kind of next generations coming up,
Yeah.
as well as the client that I referred to just a minute ago, who in that case,
Yeah.
there may be like they're 6 years apart roughly, right? From your daughter to them, and same with mine. So I don't know if they're in a different generation, but there's a reasonable gap there in
Yeah. Yeah.
terms of
Yeah.
like they're going into the workplace like imminently or trying to figure this out sooner, like
Yeah.
ASAP. So there is a little bit of a difference maybe in what will happen for 10-year-olds versus, let's say, 18-year-olds right now. But I do think, sadly, a lot of them that are more in that early 20s, I know a lot in their early 20s, that they started believing in the ability to pursue what they wanted to do, and they were slowly or quickly learned that it was a little bit too hard, so they got the job where they could just get the paycheck. Now, there's part
Yeah.
of that that
Yeah.
makes sense as parents and educators. When I think of my daughter, I think that by the time, over the next 8 years, one of the things that she struggles a bit with is her backstory, her trauma, her early years.
Mm-mm.
She brought it up on Mother's Day yesterday, but she brings it up almost every day,
Oh,
that she wishes she could see her tummy mummy and stuff like that. So
wow.
that's kind of played out. You mentioned the thing of ADHD being diagnosed, and again, whole other topics that we could discuss on the show. But it makes her creativity and her ability to do things like acting or building a business, I think, gaming, painting, anything creative, she's really, really strong at. So I think that she really will figure it out.
Yeah.
But there is one big element of I don't know if stability is the right word, but people chase the traditional paycheck for
Yeah.
stability. And this is maybe the last kind of question that we can talk about. And then if we do anything else, we can
Yeah.
do it later on. I do some rapid fire at the very end. But for the people that fear that entrepreneurship may not be for them because they need the stable thing, what do you say to those people? Because there's just millions struggling with that crisis right now.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, Nothing is stable and safe. I hate to say it. Society likes to tell us that being an employee is stable and safe, but I feel like we've all either experienced ourselves or know multiple people that thought they were in safe, stable jobs and the rug got pulled out from under them. Um, I tell the story of one of my husband's good friends who worked in finance, like very reputable. You would know it if I said the name for 10 years right after college. It was the first job he got, and he climbed the ladder. It was 10 years, 12 years, 15 years, had a great review, and then like laid off like the next week. Um, Same thing. I have a good friend, especially in this economy. I have a good friend who has had an incredible career and is absolutely an asset anywhere she goes. And, her company just had like massive layoffs and she was just part of the massive layoffs. And now it's been, months where she's been trying to find, something else. Uh, and so is that safer, more stable than what I'm doing? No. um, I like to say, this is always the question I pose is like, what's your preferred stress stressor? Because as an employee, you have certain stressors, and as an entrepreneur, you have certain stressors. And there are people who would prefer, hi, the stressors of, okay, well, I'm responsible for the next paycheck. I don't know exactly how much money I'm making week to week, month to month. But I would rather have all the freedoms that I have. I would rather have the, unlimited opportunities that I have, like all of do what I want, when I want, with whom I want. Like, thank you, that please. But as an employee, you have those stressors of you might not see it. Usually, as an entrepreneur, if you know something's not working, like you see it coming. It's normally not a collapse so quickly rug coming out from under you. Normally, COVID, asterisk, depending on the industry that you're in. So it's not there. There is. It's all a myth. And with that, I will also say I hate the advice of leap and the net will appear. Um, I, and again, I think because I mostly work with people in their 30s, 40s, 50s, um, I'm not about the, yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, you want to be a business owner, Justin? Like, you have this job that is, giving you all the financial needs like, just go give your notice tomorrow and it'll be fine. Leap, the net will appear. Like, no, it took me 2 years and 7 months to be in my full-time job while I got certified. I took my classes, I built my business, I marketed my business, I started working with people, and I felt like, and I saved money. And finally, I was able to quit and be like, okay, I'm basically quitting with a 5-month severance that I've saved up for myself and a professional website and social proof. And I feel in general that people out in the world know um, what I do and I'm here. And I had more people than I could work with at the time with my full time job. And I went, okay, think I'm going to go do this. And it was still scary as hell, even though I was, quote unquote, so prepared. But there's a way to do it more safely, even though nothing's kind of safe. So it sucks. It's all hard. It's all hard. It's all hard. So if you think entrepreneurship, if you want to be an entrepreneur because you've been lured in by, the people with their laptops on the beach with the pina colada, and this is just you're the 4-hour work week and whatever, like it's not real life unless you have a trust fund or you're a trophy wife or something like, and you don't have to worry about any of it. But if you actually need to make money and you don't have that sort of privilege, like not what it's going to look like probably ever.
Could be a trophy husband.
Could be a trophy husband. I was going to say trophy partner, but I was like, maybe people won't know what that means.
Trophy teammate. It's a beautiful mic drop moment right there. And I, like I said, love to do some rapid fire questions that go pretty darn quickly. But knowing that, who knows between now and when we're chatting again, I do always like to just give people an opportunity if there's anything else that they wanted to be sure to mention, that they'd feel like if we logged off, we'd be leaving out sort of thing.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. Maybe I just want to highlight like the freebies that I have on my site. There's for those 4 phases that I mentioned earlier, there is a training that goes into more detail about that with specifics as to what that all encompasses. There's things being added all the time. There is a, state of our businesses, why everything feels hard and what we're doing about it. Conversation there. There's, leave your job and launch your business. That feels really important. So there's a 90-minute workshop that normally I charge for that I just decided to leave as a freebie. So if you want to try to figure out, how do I build my safety net? What do I need? How will I save that money so I could leave my job? That's all on there. So, ohhellobusiness.com/freebies, and go get some free stuff that could help you.
Took the words right out of my mouth in terms of where do they go find that stuff. So
yeah. There it is.
Awesome.
That's where it's going to be.
Beautiful. And so what is one thing that you are actively learning right now?
I am actively learning day by day, present, constantly reminding myself to focus on today as best I can. To try not to get ahead of myself, to try not to spiral out and worry and stress and overwhelm, and just today is Monday. Think about Monday. I'm going to be here, in Monday. I'm learning that. And I guess more tangibly, I'm in the beginning stages of potentially, I don't know, learning about co-working spaces and dreaming of potentially starting one, even though it's a big existential, I don't know, but learning about kind of what that could look like and new ways that people want to be coming together and be in spaces to co-work, collaborate, that sort of thing. That's what I'm tangibly learning about.
That's really cool. These I need to stop doing rapid fire questions because it's I have so much to say, and then I'm I can't stop talking about it for too long. But I will quickly insert that I've always wondered what it would be like to pair the idea of physical co-working space with digital membership too, which is probably something you've thought of anyways. But
oh yeah, it's gotten to the point where I'm I see it very clearly in my head. I'm I might need to learn, even though I'm a business coach, I don't work with people on brick and mortars, and I don't work with the business plans that you need to go to the bank and ask for money with. So I'm learning kind of those pieces of what does that look like, and how do I forecast in that way, and and if I need to raise money, how would I do that? So it's further on in the future, but
awesome.
Learning those stuff. Yeah. It's a cool idea.
And one piece of advice when you have a child, it always makes it powerful, I suppose. But if you were to only leave them one piece of advice for the next generation, what would you leave them?
Yeah. Do what you love what you do.
Boom.
Annoying, but true. That's been my North Star, truly.
And if you were to ask me a question, flip the mic. You're interviewing me on your upcoming podcast. What's a question that comes to mind?
Oh, what would your current self say to your 18-year-old self?
Quit football faster. No, like I said, I love what I learned from football so much. So I do feel like a lot of times I would answer these with very esoteric, deep philosophical things. And so sorry if I'm upsetting anyone, but I feel like in a practical way, one of the big things that I wish I knew then was how to build something that is scalable, similar to what you're saying on when there's no, that there's no true safety net and there's no true definition of safe, that it's kind of relative. When
Yeah.
people that I'm around a lot have never even thought of starting a business or building a podcast, they don't see why it would be a thing that they would do. And a lot of times I'll share that my favorite reason about it is that it doesn't have to scale. You could have like 99% of your life be your regular 9 to 5, because it's what you enjoy, but your 1% is you working on this. And over time, those bar graphs can kind of scale and kind of maybe they're 50-50 someday, whatever. And I was working with both of my brothers on that when they passed, because they were both in jobs that they didn't like. They were both just going through the motions because that's how they had to pay their bills. And once you're trapped with that paycheck and exactly,
Golden handcuffs.
and so we were working through that a little bit and showing them how they could do that. In one case, wanting to be a writer, and in one case, wanting to be a Madden gamer. And he was like one of the best Madden football players ever. So
wow.
they, would they have ever, been able to monetize those true passions? Maybe, maybe not, but at least working on it a little bit gives them that creative unicorn space. And then the fact of the matter is, it's possible for it to scale. And that's how I felt about the podcast. That's how I feel about the book I'm working on. And I didn't have that understanding until I was probably 35. So if I were to go back and tell my 18-year-old self, it would be, build a Facebook group, I guess. If you were to go back to the actual date in time, that would have been a smart idea. But yeah, the idea that build something that you care about, that you could build for the rest of your life, that has a possibility of continuing to grow.
I love that. That's awesome.
Well, thank you so much. It's really been a pleasure to create with you. Universe willing, we'll cross paths again in the future. But for today, I just want to say thank you.
And I will say it right back. Thank you. This has been a joy. I really appreciate it.
Now make sure we go be great, present, in the moment parents.
Yes. As much as we can be with not so 10-year-olds running around. Just I don't know. I have an Energizer bunny, 10-year-old, and sometimes he just needs to go. Okay, bring it down.
Sometimes you got to get to bedtime.
Anyway, that's true. It's tough.
Well, thank you.
Thank you.